Zimbabwe Trust is very excited about the public hearings that are happening on the Persons with Disabilities Bill, which was gazetted in March. The bill comes at a time when Zimbabwe has signed the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Zimbabwe is implementing its constitution that was adopted in 2013, and we now have a national disability policy. And so there is a lot that is happening with regards to the inclusion of persons with disabilities in Zimbabwe. While the bill is progressive, it seeks to domesticate the NCRPD. There are a number of issues that we noted with the bill that we need to look at, and as we are reforming this bill, there is a commission that the bill proposes that will be set up. We note that organizations of persons with disabilities will be part of that commission. There will be also ministries, a number of line ministries part of the commission, but we note the exclusion of parents in the commission. Children with disabilities are raised by parents who suffer unique challenges in raising them, financial resources, sometimes just needing specialized attention and care as they raise children with disabilities. But if we exclude them from the commission, then that means that there is a huge significant population of children whose issues are not represented in our commission. In the same line, the bill speaks to health, access to health, but it excludes the provision of sign language in all health services. Persons who are deaf and hard of hearing have been suffering communication barriers, inability to access correct diagnosis, correct use of medicines, and how they need to use and dispose of those medicines, understanding the medical conditions that they can be having because of sign language, the lack of sign language in our health centers. As Zimbabwe Trust, we think that the bill should make it explicit that all health centers should have sign language interpreters that provide sign language support when persons who are deaf and hard of hearing come to access health services. One of the things that is lacking with the bill that we are very concerned about is the lack of enforcement mechanisms for the bill. We note that the bill provides for rights but does not provide what happens if those rights are violated by the various institutions that are supposed to give those rights to persons with disabilities. So there is need for penalties, there is need for enforcement mechanisms to say that if this does not happen, so for example, the Education Amendment Act says access to education is compulsory for all children, it's a right for all children, and it is a criminal offense for parents not to send their children from school. Within this bill, there are no penalties, there are no enforcement mechanisms, and that is very critical if any law is to be useful for persons with disabilities. Section 37 speaks on work and employment, and of note to us is that there has been the exclusion of the private sector in the creation of quotas to employ persons with disabilities. We believe that the private sector is a very important driver of development, and their exclusion in employment means that there are so many negative practices that are currently taking place, discrimination based on disability, just not making sure that spaces are accessible, and that has been a hindrance to employment. Employment is empowering, employment leads to independent living, and so the private sector should also have quotas for the employment of persons with disabilities. In the same article, we also note that there is an incentive for employing persons with disabilities, but putting it at $50 to $2,500 does not really provide especially at $50. It doesn't provide an incentive for organizations, private players to employ persons with disabilities because of the costs that come as a result of making reasonable accommodations, changing certain things within the workplace. So maybe there is need to look at having an amount calculated as in a percentage of annual revenue, so that it's an incentive to employ persons with disabilities. But there also there are no penalties that are provided for when persons with disabilities are not employed. What will be done to organizations, companies that discriminate based on disabilities, and what are the remedies for discrimination when it happens. There is also the issue of participation in participation in political and public life. We note as Zimbabwe Trust that 5 years is too long for compliance, because it says that it will take 5 years for the enforcement of this particular provision. 5 years is too long for compliance, that persons with disabilities should be represented in every decision-making body. I think that we need to push back the time to 2 years and not make it 5 years. It's too long. Then there's also the Article 48, which speaks to the application of the fund. The fund needs to include parents of children with disabilities in income-generating projects. It just includes persons with disabilities themselves, and we're assuming these are adults. But what happens to children with disabilities and the many needs that they have? So there's need for parents associations, parents groups and cooperatives to also be included in the fund. Specifically, they incur additional costs in raising children with disabilities, and these include food, medicine, therapies, assistive devices, additional care, so that they can also generate income. The bill does not make provisions for persons with disabilities who are disabled by car accidents. Car accidents are a major cause of disability in Zimbabwe, and yet there is no provision in this instance on how do we provide support for persons who are disabled by accidents, the compensation for injury on the road, medical expenses, loss of income, rehabilitation, and provision of assistive devices. There is need to link the bill to the road accident fund, so that they speak to each other, because road accidents are a major cause of disabilities in our country, and the silence of the Persons with Disabilities Bill to this reality needs to be addressed. So as Zimbabwe Trust, we are encouraging persons with disabilities, families of persons with disabilities, stakeholders, friends of persons with disabilities, and anyone who has an interest in disability to attend the public hearings that are taking place from today up to Friday. If you are not able to attend physically, you can also send your submissions to Parliament, and they will be taken on board. And it's very important that we participate in public hearings. Without participation, your contribution will not be included in the amendments of the bill. Thank you.